Hey Girl Scouts, today we are going to learn about poisonous plants in the Bay Area. All the way from the little ones that'll just give you a rash if you touch them, up to the ones that can actually kill you if you eat them. Now if you remember from the Leave No Trace video, when we're out in the woods, the best course of action is not to touch the plants at all. Don't eat the berries, don't pick the flowers. We want to keep this environment as pristine as possible for the animals that live here. We also just want to keep you safe. There are a lot of poisonous plants in Northern California, so today we're just going to talk about the most common ones that you'll see and how to identify them when you're out on the trails.
First up is poison oak, which is an extremely common plant in our parks, and it's very easily identifiable by its leaves. There's a saying, leaves of three, let it be. And that's because so many poisonous plants have leaves that grow in little clusters of three, and poison oak is no exception. The leaves also have very distinct lobes. They look like an oak leaf, which is how they got their name, and they can be green, orange, or violet red. If the plant does have berries, they are a tan color. You don't necessarily need to touch the plant to feel the effect of it. If you walk through a field of poison oak, the plant's oils can transfer onto your shoes or your clothing, and then if you touch your clothing later, that oil can transfer back onto your hands. That oil can cause a rash, it can cause blisters, it can make your skin itch for up to 3 weeks. I promise you it is absolutely miserable, but it does go away. Now, if you are collecting firewood, it's extremely important to check for poison oak. If you light poison oak on fire and then breathe in the smoke, that can be extremely damaging to your lungs. So you always want to double check anything that you're putting in the fire pit.
Right behind me is a patch of poison oak. You can see it's about 2 feet tall, and it tends to grow in these little fields like that, right off the side of the trail. It's usually in these big clusters. So if you step off the trail, whether it's to take a picture, go to the bathroom, whatever, you need to be very careful because that is where it's going to grow, and there's usually going to be a lot of it. So watch your step.
Next up is stinging nettle. This plant was once used for both tea and medicine, but it cannot be used raw. It has to be cooked first. These plants grow on a 2 to 5 foot tall single stem. It does not branch out, and the leaves come to a point and are very coarsely toothed, which means that they have a very choppy edge. The leaves also grow in pairs of 2 on opposite sides of the plant. When it does flower, it has tiny greenish yellow flowers, and what actually stings you are these little hairs on the underside of the leaf. They act like needles, and if you get stung by this plant, it has a burning sensation. It's quite painful, and it can last for a couple days. So even though it doesn't last very long, I can vouch that this is a very unpleasant plant to come in contact with.
I am in the East Foothills in Alum Rock Park. Right behind me is a creek, and this is where the stinging nettle loves to grow. You can see there's a giant clump of it right here, and it likes to grow right along the riverbed in these parks. So if you're rock hopping in the river or just walking next to the water, you need to be very careful to avoid these clumps of nettle.
Next we have datura, which is also known as Jimson weed. This plant is native to Central America, but it was brought to California as an ornamental, which means that we put it in our flower gardens because we thought it was pretty. It produces very distinctive white trumpet-shaped flowers, and the bush can grow 3 to 5 feet tall. The seed pods are also really distinctive. They're very round and they have these sharp little burrs all over them. Now, datura is a hallucinogenic, and people have taken it in the past as a medicine or as a drug because it will cause you to see things that aren't really there. However, this plant has been known to make people very, very sick, and it can actually kill you as well. So please do not take datura. Now we have the California buckeye, also known as the horse chestnut. These trees grow all over the place here. You'll see them all along our trails and pretty much all of the parks. And these trees can grow up to 40 feet tall. You can tell that they're California buckeye by the leaves. They have compound leaves, which means each leaf is made up of several smaller leaves. And on the buckeye, the leaves will be made up of 5 to 7 smaller leaves. The flowers are super distinctive. They grow in these long clusters of about 80 flowers, and they look like fluffy whitish tails all over the tree. Now the California buckeye looks very similar to some edible nuts like the black walnut, which does grow here, and people can sometimes confuse them. But the buckeye is in a greenish leathery pod. It's a very large nut. There's no meat around it, and it is not edible unless properly treated. So as is, it is toxic to humans. Now we are on to the foxglove, and just like the datura, the foxglove is not native to California. It was brought here as an ornamental because it has such pretty flowers. It really likes to grow in wet areas, which is why you can find it in the Santa Cruz Mountains, where it gets a little bit more rain than here in the valley. It has bell-shaped flowers, and they can be purple or white, usually with spots on the inside, and they grow in clusters up along a single straight stalk. Now, if you touch these flowers, you can get an allergic reaction like a rash, but more importantly, if you eat the flowers or if your pets eat the flowers, it can be toxic. And it's more toxic for your pets than for humans, so make sure if you're going on a walk to keep your animals on a leash so they don't accidentally eat the flowers. Next up, we have another non-native ornamental plant, oleander. Oleander can grow up to 25 feet tall, so it can look like a small tree, even though it is just a very large bush. It has long, straight, green, leathery textured leaves and gray bark. The flowers can be all sorts of different colors, white, yellow, pink, red, but they all have 5 petals. Now, all parts of oleander are toxic and they can be fatal to humans. They're also toxic to our pets, so it's important that we keep our animals away from this plant as well. Burning the wood is similar to what we talked about with poison oak. If you burn oleander and breathe in the smoke, that can destroy your lungs and it can be fatal. So always double check what you're burning. There were also rumors that oleander and oleander essence could be a cure for coronavirus. This has been debunked. There is no part of this plant that can cure COVID, so if you catch COVID, stay away from the oleander and just go to the doctor. Next is lupin, also called lupine, and this is one of my favorite springtime flowers in the Bay Area. It's very common in our grassy areas. You can usually find it growing among the poppy fields in the parks. This has blue, purple, and sometimes white flowers that grow on a straight stalk, usually 2 to 4 feet tall. You can tell it's lupin by the leaves. It has compound leaves, which if you remember are a single leaf that are made of several small leaflets. So the lupin leaves are made up of 5 to 9 smaller leaflets. Now, eating the lupin seeds or leaves probably won't kill a human, but it will make you very sick and it can kill your pets. So remember, keep your pets on a leash, especially if you're walking through the fields in the springtime. Though not technically a plant, mushrooms still deserve a mention because so many people do go foraging for wild mushrooms, but the danger is extremely high. In North America alone, there are 10,000 species of mushroom. 20% of these will make you sick, 1% of these will kill you. Now, when you go out foraging for wild mushrooms, you need to use your sense of sight, your sense of smell, sense of touch, and you have to do spore tests, which is like taking a mushroom's fingerprint and checking the color of the spores. There's a lot of training, a lot of knowledge that goes into it, and if you slip up, a lot of edible mushrooms actually have lookalikes that are toxic. So one little slip up, if you get one of your tests wrong, you could actually die from this. So if you don't have the training, if you haven't been doing this for a long time, it's best to just leave those wild mushrooms alone and stick to what you find in the grocery store.
Well, that is gonna do it for today's poisonous plants lesson. I hope you learned something new today. When in doubt, always ask an adult before touching and especially before eating a wild plant. Stay safe on the trails, leave no trace, and thanks for watching.